In today's video, we're having a quick look at the virus update, a review of last week's data, and of course, I'm going to give a bit of a talk about what Warren Buffett's done with $5.1 billion. Hello, and welcome to another acysecurities market review. My name's Alistair Schultz, and I'm going to be a host for today's trading journey. Now, having a look at the first thing today, I always do a bit of a review on what's going on in price in the last week and where I've seen some of the high impact events do the most impact. This week, we're looking at the euro dollar on a 1 hour chart, and you can see from blue line to blue line here behind me is the last week that we have seen. Now, there has been a lot of news in the last week. It has mostly been around central bank action, both from the Bank of England, we've seen from the Bank of Japan, we've also heard from the Fed. So the yellow box that we've got behind me is really where we've seen a lot of mixed news going on, all being released within one another. The interesting factor that I saw this week was some of the news from Trump, where he was saying that there would be a 10% aluminium tariff on Canada. Almost immediately after, we then heard from Canada saying that every single tariff that goes towards them will be matched dollar for dollar. Now, outside of that, there's been a lot of talk about US stimulus and trying to extend the COVID-19 relief for those who might be struggling a little bit. But unfortunately, they made an impasse on Friday and were unable to have the Democrats and the Republicans actually agree, with Trump deciding to sign some executive orders. But more on that a little bit later. Now, in addition to all of those sort of things that I've seen, we are still sitting in what seems to be a little bit of an uptrend. We do have some little patterns going on in price, so keep an eye on those and have a look for them throughout the week. They are still working to be favorably. Now, moving on from today's review, of course, if there's anything you want to have a look at or you want to get an idea of what's going on, feel free to freeze the frame and then have a bit of a Google on some of the keywords I've put up there on the screen for you. Now, having a look at the virus around the world at the moment, I try to do a bit of an update every now and again. We've got nearly 20 million cases around the globe, and we've had 729,000 deaths. Now, there are a few key points that are going on with this virus, and I've put them down for you here. Australia has had its deadliest day ever with 19 deaths, which is a stark comparison to what the worst cases have been in the US. Now, the US has also managed to put 1 million new cases in the past 2 weeks. That is extreme. And we've even heard from Larry Kudlow, who said just moments before the announcement that 1 million cases have been put in, that they were actually starting to beat the virus. 1 million cases in 2 weeks does not say that at all. Now, the other one is that Brazil has breached 5 million cases. So we've had a few issues around the globe when it comes to COVID-19. We are still seeing some issues towards the idea of vaccine of development. And of course, we've now got some worrying concerns. People are starting to look at the idea of, okay, well, if there's never a vaccine, what does that mean? What are the markets that we should be looking at? What are the stocks that are going to survive? But there's a counter side to this. Morgan Stanley have looked at the idea, well, what would happen if a vaccine did come out? Then it might upend some of the markets. We'd see all those safe haven assets that everyone's been plowing their money into get pulled out and moved into other areas. So again, something to really consider on both sides of the spectrum here, whether we have a vaccine or don't have a vaccine. It's really going to be a case of looking to see which one's going to be right and hopefully reacting fast enough to the right set of news. Now, moving on, we've had some stuff about stimulus over the weekend. Friday, we were meant to see Congress actually make an agreement. They gave themselves a self-imposed deadline to come up with something. They've gotten to an impasse. They've failed to have those talks properly. They've failed to get somewhere with the stimulus, and they've failed to find where the funding might come from. Trump decided that he would sign some executive orders to make things happen on the Saturday. Unfortunately, he's made 4 executive orders, and of those executive orders, 3 of them are likely not to actually be able to do anything because it's not certain whether he actually has the ability to do so without approval from Congress. So, of the 3 that we don't think are going to be worthwhile, his unemployment aid and an expanded sort of benefits program, that's unlikely to happen. He's talking about an extra $400 for a number of weeks longer than was initially planned. We've also seen stuff on evictions. The previous lot of evictions notices that he saw hasn't been extended. So the grounds on what this extension means doesn't really fit to the parameters, and we're not really seeing the full details of it. It's basically a very light document that doesn't give any action or any direction on where it might go. If it's anything to keep in mind, the previous one was to do with mortgages and evictions there, not to do with renters. So we're not sure if this one's going to be any different. I couldn't see anything in that was worthwhile in the actual order or the summary of it that made sense as to where it might go from here. The payroll and tax deferrals is again another one that's been a point of contention for a number of months, and we're not sure where that's going to end up either. But regardless of that, we know that whenever there is stimulus, there's usually a boost to the value of certain things in the stock market So definitely something to keep an eye on. The only one of these actions that I can actually see that might go through and might actually end up with something working would be the student loans. And that's talking about a 3-month extension on anyone who has missed payments or doesn't have payments for their student loans in the US. So that might be a big one to consider. But outside of that, the other 3 just don't look like they have the energy or the capability behind them to get passed through, because it's naturally something has to be agreed upon beyond just Trump signing a piece of paper. Now, there's also been some talk of it being a concern. Potentially, this defunds the Social Security and the Medicare levies that they have in place right now, meaning that all those people that might be getting benefits from Social Security and, of course, from Medicare and the health system might sort of get their budgets cut. So it is a worry on that front, and that was what Congress was trying to avoid. So this is why we're going to have to see what happens in the next coming weeks. Hopefully, we do see some more action around this and some more commentary on it. But for now, we're going to have to keep an eye on the situation, because naturally it's going to affect the S&P 500, the US dollar, and the variety of the economy across the globe, depending on what happens in the US situation right now. Now, looking at something else that's perked my interest has been Warren Buffett. At first, it looks like Warren Buffett had spent $5.1 billion, which would be really the biggest amount of money he's invested in stocks in quite some time. Unfortunately, the reports of him buying $5.1 billion of stock, whilst accurate, wasn't exactly accurate enough. It turns out he was actually buying back shares in Berkshire Hathaway, which is his own company. And what he has stated is said he still sees no value in the market. So that is definitely something to keep in mind, and something that is interesting considering he has been one of the most historic investors for the last several decades. It might be something to take note of. Now, looking forward, this week we have more earnings results, and they are going to be coming out in bits and dribs and drabs throughout the week. Now, the ones that I see the most impact being on, or the ones that I'm going to be watching at least, are going to be Commonwealth Bank, AGL Energy, Telstra, and SoftBank. So all of those are going to be quite big ones. We've obviously got a few others here from Newcrest Mining, Barrick Gold, Carlsberg Beers, AMP, Seek, and Downer EDI. And there's a slew of US ones coming with that as well, but none of them there really interest me too much. But if there is, feel free to jump online, have a look, Google for an earnings calendar for this season, and you'll get a good result to see when they're coming out and what might be anticipated. Now, having a look at the news ahead of this week, we do have a lot of things going on. I'm more interested in what's happening around the New Zealand dollar, because we do have monetary policy statements and rate statements this week, which might be interesting leading up to the next series of elections. Now, today is a bank holiday in Japan, so if you are trading the yen, keep an eye on that. Outside of that, we've got a lot to do with the NAB business confidence that'll be important for Australia, especially with the current Victorian situation. We've also got pound claimant counts and their unemployment counts, so it's going to be one there to keep an eye on, especially if you're on the pound. We also have pound. We've got the UK preliminary GDP results coming out this month as well, so they'll be echoing what we saw last time. Let's keep an eye on that to see if there's any changes. We've then got US CPI, Australian unemployment. We then have US retail sales. We have to expect to hear from the RBA Governor, Philip Lowe. And at the end of the week, we've got the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Report. So a lot going on this week. Please play it safe. Have a good trading week. And if you do have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at talktoal@acy.com. And of course, like and subscribe this video so you can get more great video content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.